Okay, well, there it is, 10:02. So let's get started. My name's Steve Kensley. I'm the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Network UK. Welcome to our session today that's been organized in partnership with Make My Money Matter. Our objective for the day is just to give you some guidance, hopefully some inspiration about how to align your company pension fund to your business values. And we're going to expand on that a little bit and put some personal responsibility in there too, and also give you some ideas for what you can do as an individual. Before we get going, a brief word of introduction about the UN Global Compact in case you are not already familiar with us. It's the UN Corporate Sustainability Initiative, the largest such initiative in the world. We are built out from a foundation of 10 universal principles that were drawn from UN treaties in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. And we in the UK network organize lots of activities to support companies that have made a commitment to those principles to try and make them real. And we've really been inspired by the Make My Money Matter campaign as a tremendously valuable tool in bringing about the change that we seek. We did an event, I guess it was November now, time flies, with Tony and the founder of Make My Money Matter, Richard Curtis, in November. And we want to keep that momentum going. It's our belief that every company, particularly Global Compact participating companies, need to look at this. I think it's been a blind spot for too long for too many companies, just not looking at the impact that their pension fund might or might not be having. And to a wider extent, I suppose it's a blind spot that we all have as individuals in just not paying more attention to what our pensions are doing. And so we're gonna shine a light on that today and just talk it through. I am joined by Tony Burden, the CEO of Make My Money Matter, Claire Riley, Chief Engagement Officer at Pension B, and Karen Shackleton, the Director of Pensions for Purpose. And it's we'll hear from everyone. We're going to see a short video, and then we plan lots of time for Q&A. So I would encourage you to please don't delay. Start typing your questions into the chat box at the bottom of your screen. And when we get to the Q&A, and maybe even before, we'll do our very best to address the questions you raise. Let me get it out there right up front. You're not going to get any specific investment advice from this session, but we're certainly hoping to inspire you to do better with your pension fund. As I said, do please stay on mute just to keep background noise to a minimum. And I hope I haven't missed any important housekeeping. If I did, I will leave it to my crack team to type it into the chat so that we keep things moving along. So without any further ado, I am delighted to hand over to Tony Burden.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Steve, and good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm a huge fan of the UN Global Compact, and you're really demonstrating the role that business can play in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. It's a really vital role, and really important. And I think Steve mentioned, the real issue there is the blind spot around pensions. While you as a business can be doing so much in terms of sustainability and other actions, what's happening to the money you're putting into the staff pension scheme and the money that your staff's putting into that scheme, and what impact is that having on people and planet and on the Sustainable Development Goals? So that's why we're having this session today. But maybe just firstly, just to say a little bit about Make My Money Matter. We're a campaign that was co-founded by Richard Curtis, film director. You'll know his movies. But he's also the UN Secretary General's advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals. He was co-founder of Comic Relief, co-founder of the Make Poverty History campaign. And just over the years, he's just become more interested in really understanding the impact of private finance, of the financial sector. And really, he's understood that your financial footprint, is more important than your carbon footprint as a person. So that's why he wanted to start Make My Money Matter. We're a campaign that's focused on giving people more voice and choice around how their money is invested, whether through a pension or through a bank, and to try and shift that finance into sustainable and responsible investment. And we've started first on pensions. We launched our campaign in June last year with Mark Carney, Richard Curtis, and others. And we're asking 5 things from the pensions industry. Firstly, that they align with net zero. And this is achieving net zero before 2050, net zero emissions, halving emissions by 2030. Secondly, we're asking all pension funds to mainstream ESG across the portfolio. And ESG, and Claire and Karen might expand on that later, is really sort of understanding environmental, social and governance risks across the portfolio. So mainstreaming that, so thinking about those risks more clearly. Thirdly, we're asking pension funds to grow the portfolio that's invested for positive impact. So that's much more about purposeful investment. Renewables is an obvious one, but investments in social housing could be another, where you get good returns, but also you're thinking about more clearly about the impact you have. The fourth area is for pension funds to be more active stewards of the companies that they have shares in. And that's, you'll know as businesses, but where pension funds have shares in companies, they can have a role to play in supporting the transition of those businesses to net zero or tackling other issues. And finally, we're asking pension funds to listen to their members and take their views and values into account where appropriate, given that the people who are saving into a pension aren't experts on investment. But trustees can, and we think should, be taking their views into account in their investment strategy. And we focused 2 ways in the campaign. One is by engaging the public in understanding their pension and calling for something better from the industry, but also by engaging with businesses and through businesses with your employees to look at this as well. And you'll all be aware that for you as a business, if you're aligning to net zero or if you're trying to improve the sustainability of your business, is your pension fund aligned with where you are, your mission, your values, your approach to sustainability? The Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership did some research, and they found that only 10% of companies who are taking action on their own business model and sustainability, only 10% have looked at their pensions. So there's a huge amount of work to do, but also a huge opportunity to have a kind of double impact, both as a business and then through the money in your staff pension scheme. Since we've launched, we've been running a Net Zero Hero campaign, and that's a mini campaign focused on pension funds, asking them to align to net zero emissions. And we've had thousands of people write to their pension funds demanding a net zero pension. And we've made quite a lot of progress. And I want to talk about that a little bit because I want to show to you that these things are feasible. It's not impossible. So since we launched our campaign on net zero, we've seen 10 pension funds announce a commitment to net zero emissions across their portfolio, ranging from Nest with 10 million members, to Aviva, the BT pension scheme, local government schemes, and even one just the other week who've announced, this was Cushion, announced a net zero pension that's net zero immediately because they're offsetting emissions through nature-based offsetting schemes. So that's something like maybe up to 13 million pension pots are now committed to be aligned to net zero emissions. That's over 150 billion pounds of assets invested. And we want to do more. And we know later this month, there'll be another master trust announcing their commitment to net zero. I know of 3 other big pension schemes in March that will do the same. I'm hoping that by April, May, we'll get to something like 500 billion pounds of assets under management committed to be aligned to net zero. So we're seeing, you know, an acceleration of progress, but there's a lot to do as we focus on COP26 and the race to zero. So we can make progress on this. And so my ask to you as businesses is to look at your pensions, you know, to work with your provider, your pension provider, or the trustees of your scheme, to see, you know, what's the feasibility then of aligning that pension fund, those investments, to your mission and values, to sustainability, and double the impact that you're having on people and planet by doing that, both your actions as a business, on your own business model and approach, but also on your scheme. And I think this is something that, you know, we're increasingly seeing is important for employee engagement as well. If you want to attract and retain talent, and particularly from younger people, but across all age groups, people want, you know, their money to do good. They want to work for a business that does good, and having, you know, a sustainable pension as part of your employee offer, I think is a very powerful and attractive thing to do. So, you know, I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussion, and hearing from Claire and from Karen. But, you know, please engage on this. It will have a huge impact in the run up to COP26. And as Make My Money Matter, we're here to help you. We're happy to engage with you and support you in your efforts to do that, your efforts to engage with your employees, and to shift your scheme. And there are other partners of Make My Money Matter, other businesses that have done this, who would be happy to give advice as well as you go through this process. So, you know, please have a look at this. I think then you're going to double your impact on people and planet as a business, but also through your pension. So let me just hand over now to a really inspiring clip.
Thanks very much, Tony. That was fantastic. And I think big takeaway too is that this call to action is not something for us to sit on the sidelines and wait for others to act. What's great about this one, so often when we talk about systemic change, it's kind of beyond our power as individuals to really have an impact. But this is something where we actually can do something. And as individuals, go out and make sure that our pension reflects our values, and start talking to the powers that be within our companies to make sure that those do as well. Yeah, that was really good. For anyone that hasn't seen in the chat, Tony shared the link to this video so you can share it more widely. And I actually wasn't expecting something so serious and inspirational. I know you more recently had a more tongue-in-cheek video that would also perhaps be fun to share if you're so inclined. All right, any final words, Tony, or shall we pass on to Claire?
Let's pass on to Claire. I'll share a few of the fun ones as well. But for that, Our Planet Too Big to Fail, that's been screened at maybe 50 financial sector businesses since we co-launched it with WWF last year. So if people are interested in screening it with their staff and engaging staff in that way, please get in touch, and we can work with the World Wildlife Fund to help make that happen. And if you want people to, you know, engage with your staff at a screening, then WWF and ourselves would be happy to help make that happen. And while Claire starts talking, I'll share some of our fun videos as well, and you can have a look at those. But, you know, again, those are just another way we've engaged with people with a bit of humour, but making a serious point as well. So I'll hand over to Claire, Steve. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Tony. Claire, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me today. I'm honoured to be invited to share our story with everybody today. So I'm just going to talk about the process that led us to launch the fund that was mentioned, the fossil fuel free plan, some lessons we learned, and give a quick overview of who we are and what we stand for as a business at PensionBee. So I'm just going to share my screen. Second. Can everyone see that now? So I'm going to start. The story starts really with our customers. They're at the center of everything we do, and they really took us on this journey. So here we've got Priya, Juan, Nana, and Lynn. These are the faces of our very recent outdoor campaign. So at PensionBee, the mission is to make pensions simple and engaging for everybody in the UK, and to make the kind of whole saving for retirement very enjoyable. So you can sign up to our service in under 5 minutes. You just share a few basic details on your old pensions, and then we combine them together into a new plan managed by one of the world's biggest money managers. And I think that's a really important point to make to start, is that we are a personal pension. We're not a workplace pension, and we don't manage any money. And that might be important when we get into the discussion a little bit later on. So we were founded back in 2014 as a result of a pension transfer that had gone wrong. Our CEO tried to move an old workplace pension, and she just had the type of experience that led her to understand really that kind of the UK pensions landscape is so complex. It's not really set up to serve consumers. People are not engaging with their savings. They don't know how much they're paying in fees. They don't know where their money is invested. They don't know how to find out where their money is invested. They don't even know where their balance is. And I think, to top that all off, we then, with the advent of auto enrollment, people now have 10 or 11 of these pots. And it's not rare for people to sign up to our own service with 20 pots. So people are in a kind of a situation now in the UK where they can't get the information they need, and they're feeling kind of overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation over the pension. So that's where we come in really, and we have deliberately got a very small selection of options for people to choose, and they're all plans that are offered typically in the workplace, which means anyone moving to us will be risk neutral in terms of coming across, and there'll be the same level of diversification, governance and protection that they would have in a workplace scheme. And also they will pay around the charge cap or below the charge cap, which is in the workplace scheme. So we did our first transfer back in 2016, and just going to click slide to 2016, and we've now got I think we've now got 423,000 registered customers on our site, and we're very proud of our Trustpilot score, which is 4.7 out of 5. But obviously, as this is as we're talking today about how to align your company pension fund to your business values, then I'll tell you a little bit about our values. So we stand for simplicity, quality, honesty, innovation, and love, and that kind of shapes everything we do at PensionBee. And it really shapes our mission to build a pension product for everybody in the UK. And that means we're dedicated to creating a really inclusive company. So we've achieved 100% gender parity across our whole business, our senior management team and our board. We have 40% ethnic minority representation across our business, which is obviously unheard of in financial services. We're an accredited living wage employer, and we all own PensionBee. So anyone who starts the company gets shares in the company. And so we all will share the success of the business. But let me that's a bit about us. So let me just talk about the journey we went on. So back in I think mid 2019, we started to hear lots and lots of feedback from our customers, mainly through Trustpilot, Google reviews, email. Customers were calling up saying that they were very concerned that our responsible plan, which is the future world plan, which is a plan by Legal & General, had Shell in its top 10 holdings. Now, they couldn't understand how a responsible plan could have an oil company in the top 10 holdings. And so we initially started to talk to customers on a one-on-one basis, and we started to try and explain to them about the engagement with consequences approach, and how by divesting your money from an oil company, you lose your seat at the table, you lose your voice, you lose your ability to influence those companies. We had very mixed results, to be honest, in trying to explain that to customers one-on-one. I think because at the same time, I think Shell were being forecast to increase their carbon emissions quite substantially over the next few years, when we all knew at this point that the oil companies had to reduce their oil production if they were going to meet the Paris Agreement goals. And so this was a kind of really puzzling situation for us. And so We kind of listened to our customers, and we decided that the best thing to do would be to ask Legal & General publicly why Shell was included or continue to be included in the top 10 holdings of that fund. So we wrote to them, and the letter was published in The Guardian. We got a response back from Elgin, and they said that Shell had gone much further than the other oil and gas companies in setting reduction targets. They'd also linked their targets to pay. They also were sort of wanted to stress the balance that had to be found when putting portfolios together. And the fund had already excluded lots of carbon intensive stocks, and Shell was paying at that time, I think, some of back in obviously November 2019, some of the largest dividends. And so we thought, okay, well, we've sort of reached this with our customers, but a lot of our customers were still very angry about this, and we still were getting daily emails, calls. We had customers ringing us up telling us that they couldn't sleep at night knowing that their money was invested in oil. So I think what we decided to do at that point, this was the first lesson for us, was really to get the data, because we had to work out whether this was just a very loud minority of our customers or whether this was a feeling that was prevalent across the whole customer base. So in early January, we went out and we tried to get some proper data. So we launched a survey to the customers in our main plan, and we got about a 10% response rate. And we tried to get a sense of what the mainstream customer opinions were on this, so that we could understand what we needed to do. So we saw clearly from the customers invested in our main plan that 63% wanted to continue to engage with oil companies. We saw that some other data from the survey showed us that around 60% of people wanted to stop engaging with tobacco companies and favored their outright removal. We saw lots of customers also saying that they obviously wanted weapons banned, and they also said that they wanted us to play a stronger role in advocating for their interests in dealing with these companies. So obviously we saw that they wanted to keep engaging with oil companies. We obviously shared again this survey data publicly because, we thought a big part of engaging with our customers is amplifying their voices out into the wider world and society. So we did that with this. This was obviously published in the Sunday Times. The results of the survey data is also available on our website if anyone wants to see it. But what we thought we need to do next is we need to try and find out whether the opinions of the group of customers who'd been very vocal from the very beginning on this issue, the ones who were in our responsible plan. We went out to those customers with the second survey in February 2020. And I'm just showing some kind of headlines from these surveys here. And as I said, all the results are on the website. But what we started to see was a split in the views of the people in that plan, of those who wanted out of oil and those who wanted to stay and engage. So at this point, we really had some data. And so we had some data to go to the asset management industry with. And we said to them, is there a plan? Is a plan available that will cater for this growing group of customers we've got who want to divest from oil on moral grounds? Now, in February 2020, that product did not exist in the market because we were looking for something very simple. We were looking for a mainstream product that was just very simple for normal people to understand, that didn't require a PhD in investments. It didn't rely on complex, expensive and secret data and algorithms that no one understands. We just wanted something that was a passive product that met with our investment philosophy, that was good value and had a clear ingredients list. And so that was really kind of in keeping with our mission of keeping pensions simple, but it's actually directly responding to what customers wanted. They said they wanted to remove oil and tobacco. They didn't tell us at that point they wanted to measure companies based on scoring. They just said, look, we want to remove these. So we went out to the market. And as I said, this plan didn't exist. This product just did not exist. In March 2020, Legal & General came forward and agreed to make the product for us. I think what wasn't obvious to us at that point was how long it takes. Obviously, COVID didn't help throughout 2020 in terms of getting things done. But of course, I think when we began, we had the customer demand, when we had the data, then we had the asset manager agreed to make the product. What we didn't understand at that point was that we needed an index. This index didn't exist. So we had to then wait for FTSE Russell, an index provider, to create this new index. So there was an existing index series called the Transition Pathway Initiative. It was an index series that had been built in partnership with the Church of England earlier that year. And this is an index which is a way of investing more of your money in companies who've adjusted their businesses for preparation for climate transition, and move your companies money away from companies that still have high carbon emissions. And they do this using publicly available data. So FTSE created a special version of this index. I've written the name of the index across the top there. It's got quite a long name, but it basically removes all oil, fossil fuels, controversial weapons manufacturers, and of course UN Global Compact violators from the outset, and then uses this special index to tilt towards companies that are better prepared for climate change. So then, okay, so we had our customer demand, we had our data, we had our product, we had our index, but then we needed to seed the fund. So then we had to start a campaign to get 100 million in seed funding so that we could launch this fund and keep it at the price that we wanted customers to pay for it. So in November 2020, we launched a customer campaign to get to 100 million in seed funding so we could launch this fund. I mean, obviously, at this point in 2020, you know, at the beginning of the year, we'd started with this group of customers who had this very clear moral reason for wanting to get out of oil. But as we'd gone through 2020, we now had this sort of this coming together of people whose moral and financial interest in getting out of oil has sort of come together after oil had lost all of its value. So we got to 31 million in commitments in the first week. We got lots of coverage in the press as well, as you can see here. That sort of raised demand in the market. I think we got to about 50 million in commitments from our customers, and then another workplace client came forward of Belgium, and we ended up launching the fund in December 2020, a year after we'd begun the journey. And we've now seen thousands of our customers switch into the plan, and I thought I'll just end with them again, because you know that's where we started and that's where we've ended with this. And so here we've got Emma, Lester, Peter and Emma. These are all customers who are now investors in the fund. They've invested for a mix of reasons: moral, financial, pressure from their children to go green. And I thought I'd just end with a testimonial of Emma, who's in the top left, who wrote to us and said the reason that she was signing up to the fund was because there's a campaign with Richard Curtis of Comic Relief called Make My Money Matter. The headline of that is that there's 3.5 trillion of pensions in the UK, and if we divested that from fossil fuels, then that's 3.5 trillion investment for sustainable technologies and infrastructure that we can definitely use. So I think, you know, that was, you know, as the year had gone on and Make My Money Matters campaign had got, you know, sort of more and more attention, I think, you know, we also had customers that were moving across the pond because of that. And so just to end there, you know, this whole journey on with our customers was a success story for them, a success story for engaging people with their retirement, I think, importantly, but for the planet, for pensions. And I think really, you know, the journey that our customers took us on, and that relentlessly listening to what they wanted and what they wanted to do with their money, took us on this amazing journey to create this product and to get this product out in the market that is a kind of first mainstream way to just completely remove oil in a way that wasn't possible before. And that's a huge win for everybody. So I'm going to stop there.
Thanks very much, Claire. That was really interesting and always nice to see such a positive success story. I've got lots of questions, both for you and for Tony. So I'm going to just put it out there to our audience to do please remember to put some questions in the chat for us that we can address as soon as we hear from Karen Shackleton. Karen, over to you.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Just to give you a little bit of background before I start, Pensions for Purpose is a platform that exists as a bridge between asset managers and pension funds and their professional advisors. And what we're trying to do is to encourage a flow of capital into impact investment, positive investments. And so our aim is to empower pension funds to seek positive impact opportunities and also to mitigate against negative risks. We have an information platform with over 1,000 articles on sustainable ESG and impact investment. We run workshops for pension funds to help them on their journey. And Claire, I can't tell you how refreshing it was to hear a really, really good example of a pensions provider who's really grappled with this agenda and moved forward. So I thought I'd just spend a few minutes talking about how exactly can a pension fund move towards a sustainable investment approach. And I think the first thing to do is to do a little bit of education. So make sure that you are absolutely clear on the difference between ESG, environmental social governance, where you're incorporating the risks and opportunities into any investment decisions. Sustainable investment, where you're introducing themes like, for example, a fossil-free portfolio. And sorry, my phone is just going, so I'll just pull that out. And then also impact investment, where you are investing with intention and purpose to try and achieve something positive. And I was very struck by David Attenborough's comment: do we invest in things that contribute to the climate crisis, or do we invest in things which will help solve it? And that's very much what impact investment is trying to do. So the first step then is to really understand the terms, do a little bit of education, understand what the jargon means. What does net zero actually mean? What are carbon emissions and carbon footprinting? What's SDG alignment, sustainable development goal alignment? Once you've gone through that sort of learning process, I then usually encourage pension funds to go through a sort of 5-step plan. And that starts with agreeing a set of investment beliefs. Now, we do a workshop with pension fund trustees where we use the sustainable development goals as a framework for that discussion. But we really encourage the trustees to keep an investment focus. They have fiduciary responsibilities to deliver the best risk-adjusted returns for their members. So we talk to them about what opportunities are there or what risks are there by prioritising different sustainable development goals. And we come out at the end with an agreed set of priorities for the fund. Sometimes that will include goals, for example, wanting to achieve net zero by 2050 is an example, reducing carbon emissions by 30% over the next 3 years or whatever they decide to do. Once they've done that, I usually then recommend that they do a mapping exercise. Now this means understanding where the existing portfolio stands in relation to the priorities, the sustainable development goal priorities that the trustees have agreed. Now that's important because it allows you to see where you are perhaps already aligned and where you've got issues in the portfolio that perhaps need to be addressed. The third step is to think about the investment strategy. Now this is usually done in conjunction with a consultant, and traditionally they've done some modelling, and that'll be done looking at risk and return and coming up with an optimal portfolio. Now what we need to do is bring purpose into the equation. So it's a third dimension: risk, return, purpose. They then come up with a set of recommendations. Now that might, for example, be a recommendation to move the passive portfolio to low carbon passive or fossil free passive. It'll depend on the investment beliefs that have been discussed at the outset. So the fourth step is to then implement those changes. And what's really important is that when you're thinking about changing investment managers, to bring the purpose that you want to bring in into the criteria for manager selection. And then the final step is to monitor and review. Impact measurement is really important because it allows you to, first of all, see whether your asset managers are doing a good job for you, but also it allows you to report on progress that you're making towards your goals. So finally, I just want to talk about what does best practice look like in a pension fund, and we heard from Claire, and that I was sort of looking and thought, yeah, they've done a lot of the examples that I would say is what is best practice. So the sorts of things that you could perhaps talk to your pension fund about are, ask them, are the investment beliefs clearly expressed in the investment strategy statement? Are they measuring and monitoring and reporting on their impact or their purpose over time? For example, reporting on climate change and climate action. Do they mention purpose in any manager selection criteria when they're advertising for new roles? Have they set specific goals and a timeline? For example, do they want to achieve net zero by 2030, 2040, 2050, or whatever they have agreed? Are they proactively engaging with members on this? I mean, Claire highlighted the importance of doing that, absolutely critical. And then finally, do they have an ESG expert on the trustee board? Or is there an expert advising the trustees? That might be a climate expert, it might be an ESG expert. So that really is a sort of quick summary of, sort of the whole topic of how we are helping pension funds move towards, because the conversations that I've had with pension funds is that many of them are desperate to do something, but they just don't know where to start. And if you break it down into smaller steps, it becomes manageable and achievable. So there you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karen. That's really helpful. I think those practical steps are definitely what's needed. Now, we've got a really interesting question in the chat, but I'm going to take my moderator privilege first, because I've got a bit of a theme of questions that's been brewing for me right from Tony's comments through Claire's, and it's around, I suppose, this, maybe I could go to Claire first and just ask for an explanation about engagement with consequences. It's a catchy expression, and that's what I was thinking, you know, right from the start with Tony. At what point do you stop engaging and do you switch and look for a different fund? And I think this comes into your comments, Karen. You know, as a layperson, I've changed my personal bank account many times, a couple of times, and I know that's easy. Contemplating changing my business account, I don't even want to think about it. And I'm just wondering about changing fund managers or fund hosts. Just how big a deal is that? Or is it engagement the only realistic option? And if so, that seems to be a power imbalance there that probably needs to be addressed. And I have a knock-on question. So maybe first, could we just elaborate on what are the consequences and how much, what sort of teeth do we have as pension beneficiaries or companies with a pension fund? Hey, Claire, could you start?
Yeah, so engagement with consequences is the approach that is used by the Future World plan. That's the plan I was talking about by Legal and General Investment Management. And divestment is really a way to hold a company to account. And it's the absolute final step that would be taken after a very long period of trying to engage with the management team of a company and trying to hold them to account for, you know, I use the example of Shell being linking executive pay to carbon emissions. You really spend a long period of trying to get a company to change before you say, look, this is the final step. Because as I said, you can divest once. The minute you sell those shares in the company, you lose your voice, you lose your seat at the table, and you lose your ability to engage any further with the company. Legal and General Investment Management did it very publicly with ExxonMobil in 2019. They divested all their shares from the Future World range from ExxonMobil as a last resort, because they said that Exxon were just not publishing or sharing the level of transparency that would be required for them to kind of show that they were moving in the right direction in terms of transition to low carbon economy. And so it's the final step basically in a process. But obviously when we launched our new product, it's for the people who just thought the time for engagement with these types of companies was over, and that years of engagement had actually led to an increase in production. So really it's about your personal opinion on whether you think engagement with these types of companies works or not. But I think you need to be able to offer both approaches.
Okay, that's very clear. Thank you. Can we extrapolate that to the relationship with a pension provider? And if they aren't providing the kind of products that Pension B has pressed Legal and General into providing, can you switch and go elsewhere? Is that?
I'd love to see engagement with consequences in the pension space. I think that would be amazing. I think if everyone picked up their money and moved it and said, I actually want more, I think we'd have effective competition. We'd have a kind of flourishing, amazing, thriving pensions market of all these amazing new innovative products and services. Unfortunately, people don't do that at the moment because they're not engaged with their savings enough to care and to go through the process of picking their money up and moving it somewhere else. But I think that responsible investment, and I think Tony's campaign, and I think all of the work that Make My Money Matter are doing is an amazing vehicle for engagement and an amazing way to get people interested in their savings for the first time, and perhaps make them take that step of actually engaging with consequences with their providers.
Karen, did you want to come in?
Well, it's interesting. I, wearing a different hat, act as an independent investment advisor to local authority pension funds. Now, their committee meetings they have a part 1 and a part 2, and part 1 is a public meeting. So any member of the public can join that meeting. And Extinction Rebellion have had quite an organised campaign to target the local authority pension fund committee meetings, to challenge them to think about divestment. And there are some excellent videos on YouTube of Extinction Rebellion throwing confetti over committee members in the middle of a committee meeting. And I mean, it was a very effective campaign because it made the committee members think about climate action and has led to a lot of progress. And I would say that some of the local authority pension funds are actually the leaders in terms of working towards a net zero campaign. So I think engagement is a really, really positive thing to do, and we should all be trying to move towards this. I think the other point I would make is that if you divest, you're selling your shares to another shareholder. And what I often say to my local authority pension fund clients is, you know, who would you prefer to be holding a company? An engaged investor who is trying to work towards improvement and addressing climate action, or an investor who really doesn't care less and is just out to make money? And I know who I would prefer to have as the investor.
Although I note from one of the slides that Claire showed, there was a pretty significant minority in the "I don't care, leave it to the government to manage ethics. All I care about is my returns." So we do have our work. Well, Tony, you got your work cut out for you for sure, but I suppose we all have a role to play. Are you seeing that, Tony, that companies are shifting? Is it something that is to shift to a different pension provider that's offering more sustainable options, or is that a really difficult thing to do? And
great. No, a few things. I think it's starting, and it'd be interesting on this call. And we did this with a business in the community call a while ago. You know, many of you businesses might have a scheme with Legal and General, where a lot of that money is going into the Future World scheme. So if you've got 10 businesses asking Legal and General to make that scheme a net zero emissions scheme, that's a lot of pressure. That's not just 500 individuals writing to a trustee. That's 10 businesses with thousands of employees. That will have a huge impact. So I think part of this, if all of you are engaging with your pension fund provider, that's huge pressure. And it's not just pressure, it's a commercial issue for Legal and General or for Aviva or whoever. They'll lose business if you move to another provider. So I think it's absolutely vital that you put that pressure on, and to remember, you know, with this pension fund, it's your business's money as well as your employees' money. So you have a stake as a business in that pension fund too, and your employees. So I think that pressure really is needed. I think both Claire and Karen have covered the issue of engagement with consequences. I mean, divestment is the sort of last resort, but engagement is that way of helping drive the transition that's needed. And then if you've got all of these shareholders, all of these pension funds, through their fund managers, collectively driving the same point of view across these businesses, we're going to help drive that transition. So I think there's a lot of potential there. But there was that question from Matt as well about investors unwittingly invested in destruction. So I think there's a bit of progress being made here, in that the requirements on pension funds to disclose or report on their impacts on climate, has improved substantially, and the pensions bill that was recently passed has just done that also. But the thing is, what we have is now we'll get much more reporting and disclosure from pension funds, and there'll be a consultation shortly on an approach to projecting warming impact or emissions from pension funds, so that you could require from a pension fund that it reports on its emissions to 2050, or its impact on its temperature impact to 2050. So in a way, this will allow pension funds to be ranked with regards to their impact on climate, and again will feed into the ability then for people to make better informed choices about the pension fund they're with. So unwittingly invested, I don't know. I think most trustees of pension funds must surely know by now that their pension fund is contributing to the climate emergency, and that the only way it shouldn't be contributing is by aligning to net zero, and to do that rapidly with a halving of emissions by 2030. So everybody knows that now. There are none in the industry who are naive about this. So you're either investing in the climate emergency or you're doing something to tackle it. And that should become a question that you ask your pension provider about, or the trustees of your scheme. But the other thing is about risk. So if your scheme is investing in businesses that aren't transitioning and reducing their emissions, they're putting your own money at risk that's in the pension fund, and your employees and their savings at risk by investing in businesses that are going to lose value in the future. And that's, I think there's more understanding about that now, but we need to just create more momentum for the shift in investment to happen. But my own view is that trustees are failing. They're failing their members. They're putting their members' money at risk in future if they're not aligning the scheme to net zero, because they're continuing to invest in assets that may lose value over time because they're not transitioning to where the world is going to go, which is a net zero world. So just some comments there, Steve.
Thanks, Tony. I think that's a great response to the unwitting piece. Now we've had two questions, a question from Karen and a question from Harriet, that are, I think, quite linked, coming back to the practical. And I'm thinking maybe, Karen, this one might be best for you to take on. So I'm going to assume that in Karen's top 3 things, one of those things is going to relate to who do you start talking to. But could you help us out with some really tangible steps?
Okay, so in terms of who to start talking to, I think you have to sort of have a twin attack. You have to go to both. I mean, I shared with Tony a few months ago that my son watched a David Attenborough film, and afterwards said, "Oh, I really want to move my pension fund." And he went on to his company website where the pension fund was being advertised, went through to the pension provider, and he simply couldn't get access to the sorts of range of funds that he wanted to get access to. And so it was sort of then, well, what can I do about it? But I think you have to have a twin pronged attack, and I'm sure Claire will have a view on this as well. In terms of what should you do to start the conversation? Well, where I've seen this most effectively done through sort of deputations and requests to meet, there've been very clear evidence and not emotional. It's been very factual, sort of academic research, or Mercer, for example, have done a big piece of research on the financial implications of climate change on portfolios. So I think keeping it investment focused is important, keeping it unbiased and keeping it unemotional. So evidence. Go in with a clear request. Don't try and solve everything on day one. So remember, a pension fund is on a journey, and if you want them to go to the sort of ideal in one step, they'll just be overwhelmed, and they probably won't spend much time thinking about it. Whereas if you say, look, first we would like you to do X, Y, Z, with a clear request, then that becomes a more manageable task for them. And then the third thing to do would be to offer them resources of places they can go to for more information. And you know, I mean, we offer a free course, for example, just to sort of scope out what is ESG, sustainable and impact investment. So it's sort of just providing them with some help or some signpost them to Make My Money Matter, for example, for more information, places they can go to for more information. So they would be my top 3 things. Thanks
very much, Karen. Claire, did you want to share really quickly? Yeah.
I mean, obviously echo absolutely everything Karen has said. I mean, I kind of totally the same. I think, look, start with members, start with member views. That would be the approach I take. I don't know, have a pension party, you know, use the Make My Money Matter, like, you know, template, like hold a pension party for all the team, grab a drink, watch the video that we just watched or the longer video, and have a discussion about where you expect your money to be invested. Get a sense of what the ideas are, get a sense, then get the data. You know, as Karen said, you need the evidence, you need unemotional evidence. What are your asks? You get your data, then go to your asset manager or your pension provider, whoever provides that product for you, and say, look, here's the data, here's what we want. Can you give it to us? You know, whether that's excluding tobacco, excluding oil, baseline screens, whatever that is, right? If they say, no, sorry, we can't, you say, okay, well, we're going to do a review of the options in the market. You know, maybe another provider can give that to us, right? And then see what else is available in the market and loop that back round and keep checking in with the people who came to the pension party in the beginning and say, look, this is what you asked for. This is the work we're doing to get there. It's not as easy as we thought it might be necessarily, but you know, we'll get there in the end. And this is kind of where we're at. And then there was just another question I really, really quickly want to answer about how to get information about where your pension is invested, because I think it's a really important question and it's really hard. So it's really hard to get from the asset managers the full list of where the money is. And that's sometimes because there are like 20,000 holdings and there are funds of funds of funds and you have to go 7 layers down. But the thing is, if we all start asking for it, they will get used to providing that information, because at the moment they're not. The moment you ask for it and they don't give it to you. But I think if everyone here went to their pension provider and said, can I have the full list of the holdings? They'd get in the habit of providing this information as standard, and then I think it would all be more freely available to customers. Sorry, I jumped in with 2 answers there.
That's good to have. That's great. We're really down to the wire on time. So I want to I know both Karen and Harriet, and so I know they're from larger companies in senior roles in sustainability teams. And so I'm wondering specifically, I know you can't generalize because every company and their pension situation is likely to be different. Is that relationship with the pension fund or the pension board typically owned by CFO, company secretary, general counsel? Who would be the focal point in a typical company that you would start this conversation with? Is it possible to generalize?
Shall I go first, Claire? I mean, it varies. That's the difficulty, is that sometimes it's one and sometimes it's another, but there is usually somebody that will have responsibility for the pension fund. They may have the title pensions manager, don't always, sometimes it is director of finance, for example, has overarching, but there will be somebody who has responsibility of preparing the papers for meetings and guiding the trustees in terms of the agenda. And it's a question of finding out who that person is in your organization.
Okay, Tony, did you want to get, I want to have a 30-second answer to Kenneth. I would say the pension's been a blind spot for UNGC as well. And I think that the UK network is taking a lead within the Global Compact on this. And it's certainly our ambition to get our colleagues at other local networks engaging with the Make My Money Matter campaign, as well as to pull in our global colleagues. So I hope that we are going to assist this campaign in accelerating its impact globally. As for a more holistic view, I think, you know, Karen's references to SDGs really says it all. It doesn't get much more holistic than that, and I think that's key. I think it's not entirely accurate to frame climate as only an environmental issue, because clearly it's much wider than that in its implications. But I think certainly SDGs are meant to bring in all of the more social issues there. We've run over time, so I'm afraid we're going to have to draw a line under this. So I'm going to just, I'm from UN Global Compact. Thanks very much, Tony, Karen, and Claire. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you. Thank you, our dear audience, for joining us today. I can say, I think with some confidence, we'll be back, because I think this is a really critical conversation, and it's a real pleasure working with you all. And so we're going to want to do this again. Tony, did you want to get in a final word before we
Yeah, just to say thanks everybody for attending, and we'd be really happy to follow up with you know, any of you who want to take this forward in your company. So just let us know, and we can work with Steve on how to do that effectively and get you some good advice. So thank you.
Fabulous.
And thanks to Karen and Claire for joining us. Fantastic. Yes,
can't thank you enough. All right, everyone, have a great day, and we look forward to speaking again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.